Gun violence is a complex issue, but it's one that we can't ignore. We need to take action to reduce gun violence and make our communities safer. In this video, we're going to take a look at the increasing rate of gun violence in the US and why it's happening. We'll discuss the factors that contribute to gun violence, and we'll look at some of the solutions that have been proposed to address this problem. Countries with high gun violence: 1. El Salvador 2. Venezuela 3. Guatemala 4. Honduras 5. Colombia 6. Brazil 7. Mexico 8. United States 9. South Africa 10. Yemen. Do you think why we discuss it? The United States has a gun violence problem. In fact, it has the highest rate of gun violence in the developed world. In 2020, there were over 45,000 gun-related deaths in the US. The United States has the highest rate of gun violence among developed countries. The United States has more guns per capita than any other developed country. This makes it easy for people to obtain guns, even if they have a history of violence or mental illness. The high levels of poverty and inequality. Poverty and inequality are linked to higher rates of crime and violence. In the United States, these problems are especially acute in urban areas, which are often home to high rates of gun violence. The prevalence of gang violence. Gangs are a major source of gun violence in the United States. Gangs often use guns to settle disputes, protect their turf, and intimidate rivals. The lack of effective gun control laws. The United States has some of the weakest gun control laws in the developed world. This makes it easy for people to obtain guns, even if they should not be allowed to have them. The culture of violence in the United States. The United States has a long history of violence, dating back to the country's founding. This culture of violence is often reflected in the media, which often glorifies violence. The relationship between mental health and gun violence is complex, and there is no single answer to the question of how mental health can be effective for gun violence. However, there are a number of ways that mental health can play a role in preventing gun violence. One way that mental health can be effective for gun violence is through early intervention and treatment. If people with mental health problems are able to get the help they need early on, they may be less likely to engage in violent behavior. There is evidence that shows that early intervention and treatment for mental health problems can help to reduce the risk of violence. Another way that mental health can be effective for gun violence is through gun violence prevention programs. These programs can help to educate people about gun safety and the risks of gun violence. They can also help to identify people who may be at risk for violence and connect them with resources for help. In addition to early intervention and treatment, and gun violence prevention programs, there are a number of other ways that mental health can be effective for gun violence. These include improving access to mental health care. People with mental health problems should have easy access to quality mental health care. This can help to prevent violence and improve the overall well-being of people with mental illness. Challenging stigma. The stigma associated with mental illness can prevent people from getting the help they need. It is important to challenge stigma and raise awareness about mental illness. This can help to ensure that people with mental illness are able to get the help they need. Promoting social connectedness. People who feel connected to their community are less likely to engage in violence. It is important to promote social connectedness and build strong communities. One way that drugs can increase the risk of gun violence is by impairing judgment and decision-making. When people are under the influence of drugs, they may be more likely to make impulsive decisions that could lead to violence. For example, they may be more likely to get into arguments that escalate into violence, or they may be more likely to use a gun in self-defense when they would not have done so if they were sober. Another way that drugs can increase the risk of gun violence is by increasing aggression and violence. Additionally, some drugs, such as alcohol, can have a disinhibitory effect that can make people more likely to act on aggressive impulses. Effect of gun violence: loss of life. Gun violence is the leading cause of death for children and young adults in the United States. In 2020, there were over 45,000 gun-related deaths in the United States. Gun violence also leads to a significant number of injuries. In 2020, there were over 100,000 gun-related injuries in the United States. These injuries can be serious and life-altering. Trauma. Gun violence can also have a significant psychological impact on those who are exposed to it. Survivors of gun violence may experience post-traumatic stress disorder (PTSD), anxiety, and depression. Fear. Gun violence can create a climate of fear in communities. People may be afraid to go out in public or to send their children to school. This fear can have a negative impact on the quality of life in communities. Disruption of communities. Gun violence can also disrupt communities. It can lead to businesses closing, people moving away, and a loss of trust in law enforcement. Economic impact. Gun violence also has a significant economic impact. It costs the United States billions of dollars each year in healthcare costs, lost productivity, and law enforcement costs. I hope that this video has helped to raise awareness of the issue of gun violence. If you're interested in taking action, then support stricter gun control laws. Volunteer for a gun violence prevention organization. Together, we can make a difference. So don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you want to aware about the current situation smartly.